these days people just want to actually hear somebody really telling a true story that's come from a place of the heart, let's say, rather than authenticity. When we are getting clients to write website copy, they sort of go into year 12 essay mode and they start writing these long words and strange sentence structure. But if I ask you about your business face to face, you're going to get a much more honest and sort of, I'm really passionate about this. We've been doing it since da-da-da-da. And that sort of tone, I think, is going to resonate better with your customers than trying to write something that sounds like, marketing speak, which is sort of, I think, how people think they need to get their message out. Whereas face to face, they're probably doing a really great job of selling themselves.
Welcome to episode 177 of Be The Drop, a weekly interview podcast sharing stories from people who inspire and motivate others to help you learn how to tell your story. I'm Amelia Veal, Director at Narrative Marketing and firm believer in the superpower of storytelling. This week's episode is ideal for anyone wanting to learn about small business digital marketing. As a business owner delivering content marketing and training services, I understand the incredible value in sharing the experience and knowledge of other business owners in this field. Sam Davies is the founder of Digital Noir. He's the Humans Aren't Robots podcast host and a self-confessed barbecue enthusiast. Coming from a background in design and web development, he started his first marketing business in the UK. When he returned to Adelaide, he decided it was time to put more of his own personality into his business, and that's when Digital Noir was born. In today's episode of Be The Drop, Sam reflects on what it means to be sincere with your business messaging in today's digital world. We compare podcasting journeys and break down the content creation to distribution process, whilst also sharing a wide range of small business digital marketing tips. This is Sam's version of Be The Drop. Are you considering starting a podcast? At Narrative Marketing, we deliver a full range of podcast production options. Or if you'd like help getting started to produce your own content, we also deliver podcast training programs. Hit the link in the show notes for more details. Welcome to Be The Drop, Sam.
Oh, thank you for having me. I was thinking about this interview, and it does feel like we sort of are a little bit of a reflection of each other. We both have a marketing agency or a creative agency of some respect, and we've both been podcasting for a couple of years. And we seem to have kind of similar interests around the things we focus on in some of the guests that we talk to.
Yeah, I feel like we've had crossover with guests we've talked over. So it's about time we crossed over each other.
We've been trying to make it happen for a while.
I know. I feel like over a year.
Yeah, literally. It has been over a year, literally. So Be The Drop is your podcast.
That's right.
And the thing so we've just renamed our podcast to
I know, this was one of my questions. So why? What was the whole big piece behind changing it?
Sure. So
because isn't it obvious that humans aren't robots? Why?
Maybe not. So it's funny. It's mostly came through sort of marketing stuff. So we like to, and I think it's similar to how you talk about storytelling, right? It's not treating people just like numbers and actually connecting on that human level. I think the times we live in at the moment, we're so surrounded by tech and I like in these conversations just to be able to break away from that and actually connect.
So for you then, in the marketing landscape, what is it that you think does really resonate with people? How is it that you build connection?
I think just doing you as a business or as a brand or as a product, whatever it is, but and you talk about it a lot through all of your conversations you've had, but warts and all, and embracing I suppose the full 360 degrees of what it is to be a brand or a company. And these days, people just want to actually hear somebody really telling a true story that's come from a place of the heart, let's say, rather than authenticity.
Yeah. I know. And look, it's marketers. We're terrible. And I feel like as marketers, we're allowed to say this, but we ruin words like authenticity, authentic and genuine. And I really do try to do jargon free, but I catch myself,
sincerity is maybe a nice way, because when we are getting clients to write website copy, they sort of go into year 12 essay mode and they start writing these long words and strange sentence structure. But if I ask you about your business face to face, you're going to get a much more honest and sort of, I'm really passionate about this. We've been doing it since da-da-da-da. And that sort of tone, I think, is going to resonate better with your customers than trying to write something that sounds like, marketing speak, which is sort of, I think, how people think they need to get their message out. Whereas face-to-face, they're probably doing a really great job of selling themselves.
I get it, because even in my personal journey, when I started my business, Narrative Marketing, that was about 6 years ago. And I was like, so I have to have some corporate branding, and I needed to be in the professional world. And then there's me. And I'm not, I'm very serious about delivering good work, but I'm loud and fun and energetic. So that didn't come through in my branding. And so after a few years of having that branding, I just let that go. And I was like, you know what? I believe in storytelling and the superpower of it. And, it can change the world. And I believe this wholeheartedly. It vibrates through me. So I was like, bugger it. I'm going to have a superhero themed branding. I'm going to play with this. I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to take my energy and put it into it. So, I've got kapow and I was like, whoa. And it's still the infinity, but it's more casual and more brush and superhero red and superhero blue. And then I make my t-shirts and
that sounds like a really cathartic process for you to go through.
It was amazing. It was so much fun. I had fun and now I can use that. I can talk about it.
I did the exact same thing as you. My first business was Scrimshaw Communications, leave a lasting impression. And it was this corporate logo, corporate website. It was just me consulting. It made it seem like I was much bigger than what I was, and established in 2005. And when that was in the UK, I came back to Adelaide and was like, no, I want to do something fun that represents me. So Digital Noir comes from my love of film and wine, and our first thing was sort of quite comic booky as well, just sort of more of my passions into the business. And I think I had so much more fun, marketing that and talking about it, because it was coming from a place a passion for me, as opposed to trying to create something that was fake.
But it is easy to fall into that trap.
Very easy.
But so rewarding when you just lean into it and go with it.
So I think you've been doing podcasting 4 years now?
Yeah, no, I've just ticked into my 4th year.
What are you doing differently now 4 years in than when you started?
Some of the big differences is that it's easier for me to get guests. It has its own momentum now, where people know the podcast. And, advice I say to people is, ask to be on podcasts, but do your research, because I also get obvious cut and pastes. And I'm like, you don't know anything about it because you have not demonstrated that, as opposed to someone who sends me an email and goes, I love your podcast. This is what I could offer your listeners. This is what I would talk about. Would you consider me as a guest? And I'm all like, yes.
100%. So that right there is the personification of my humans aren't robots value, right? And that is actually one of our values at DN is that if you're sending me a cover letter that it says "Dear Sir" and it's copy and pasted, I won't look at it.
Carbon copy doesn't work. No, exactly.
Not at all.
Yeah. So then different things. We've got more formula around the process of how we edit and how we distribute, just time saving sort of stuff. So, and we're a lot better. We're across more. We understand that podcast distribution is different than, say, Facebook or YouTube, where you put, whatever your content is up onto one channel and then it's done. Whereas we now realize that, and because it's constantly evolving, there's new podcast directories all the time. And probably for a couple of years, we didn't even really realize that the value of being across all of the podcast directories.
Yeah. How have you found, how's it changed has it changed the way that you have conversations with people? Yeah. And as that with the interviewer hat on specifically?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love talking, but communication is equally and potentially more importantly about listening. There's lots of things going on that's involved in active listening. So yes, definitely that is a skill that I have improved and will continue to try and improve.
It's the biggest thing I think that I've noticed. And then I think when I started, I thought I was better at it than what I was. And I listen back and it really is, it is tricky because you do have a sort of a narrative in your mind already at the start. Yeah. Hey, let's go, we're going to talk about this, we're going to talk about that. And then it might meander off and you need to keep it on track to an extent, but also follow those threads where it makes sense. So
but certainly, I probably thought I was better at it than I was, but I feel I've definitely gotten better.
How do you warm people up? Because I think that but sometimes, so I've got another podcast I do, a competition barbecue, which is another aside. We've got a podcast with that, and a few of the people have just been the most charismatic, bigger than life people off air, and then they get on the mic and it's just nothing. And then the podcast has ended, and then all of a sudden it's back on. I've just kept recording and we've used that as the podcast because you've had 20-minute conversation at the end. I think you notice when people are in their head and really sort of second guessing their answers and thinking too much about what's happening as opposed to being in the moment. It can be tricky.
So, well, and then talking about the barbecues. So this is obviously something you're really passionate about as well. Like, so what's that like but you're bringing in the podcast into it. That's great.
Oh yeah. I managed to weave all these things into my life somehow. So food's always been massive for me. So I love food since I was a kid and kind of got into cooking more probably 10 years ago. Barbecue's sort of always been passionate. And then we did work for Weber, and through that found out more about this sort of whole competition stuff that goes on, which I didn't know anything about. Kind of got hooked now. So we've been doing it 4 years. So got a team and we do sort of 5 or 6 competitions a year around the country, and it's really fun.
Yeah, why not? And okay, so let's go back to communication and building communication, that actually connects. So for you then, what do you think are some of the really key things, like when you're working with clients, how do you think people can successfully build connection?
Sure. So I really think it comes back to, and we've talked to Andre about this, with Venomofa. I think they did such a great job coming back to that, who are you as a business or as a company, whatever it is, and taking that conversational tone. So I think really if you can think, so we talk to clients about if your website was a person, who would it be? And what would if they walked into a room, like what would the conversation they have be with, the people that are standing in front of them?
And in that digital, and obviously with the change in your name, the humans are not robots, digital platforms are incredibly, powerful, good way to connect. How do you manage the digital and the human to still maintain that connection, to be like the person in the room?
Being fairly platform agnostic, Facebook and Instagram are big in Australia right now. Before that it was MySpace and the radio and television. It's just different ways of getting your message out there. I think the benefit of the digital platforms we have now is they are sort of easier to reach your audience that you want. That comes with some caveats around and privacy, and there's whole issues around that too, I think, which is going to get increasingly concerning and probably make, as consumers and as people living in a digital world, we're going to have to become a bit more savvy about that. But I think if we can put those blinkers on and say, we don't want to hear from these people, but I do want to hear from these types of people, then really you've got that platform. So then it's like, how do I make a direct connection with you who might be interested in my stuff, but I don't want to scream at you, buy this, buy this, buy this. It's like, hey, how are you? Like, we can offer this value, you're interested. And I think it's as simple as that, really. Obviously, there's ways about going and doing that, but starting like a real conversation. Marketing hasn't changed at all, right? I mean, yeah, there was this thing, you've got to be on social, or you've got to do Facebook. It's like, well, what does that mean? And maybe you don't. Maybe are the people that you want to talk to on Facebook?
Yeah. Or if they're on Facebook, are they there because at the time that they want to talk to you?
Yeah. I had a meeting with a client the other day, works for a business. He's come in as a new biz dev guy. They still cold call him. That's their only way of marketing. And he sort of said, right, we need to put a digital strategy in place. And so I started having that conversation. They have nothing, no social, their website's very minimal. So I'm like, this is kind of a long game for you from here. Like, you've got to start building a reputation for yourself online. You need to start. And so it sounds like they do all these things on a personal level within the business. It's been around for 45 years. It's got a great long tradition. Coming straight into digital and screaming that isn't going to win in the trust of the types of clients they want to work with. So it's kind of a long game then, right? I think it comes into culture, a really strong sense of identity. Who are we as a business? What do we stand for? Who are our people? How do we want to talk to them? How do we want them to engage with us? We're so fickle as consumers now too. One sloppily written email or one thing at the wrong point in that sort of buying process can really put you off. And I think that's tricky for bigger brands that do cross over those, have quite a broad age range demographic. And I think the beauty of the tools again, so that the digital is fantastic in the sense that, it was pretty much impossible to tailor a TV ad to a demographic. People from 12 to 70 were watching Neighbours, right? There was no real way to sort of target that in. Whereas we can do that now, and we can target, tailor a message or talk in a tone that suits with who we're sort of chatting to and resonates. So I think that's exciting. So the digital doesn't need to come in as kind of a nefarious tool. It's just a platform to get the message out there. And at the end of the day, a lot of the stuff we're doing is written communications or voice or video, which has been around for forever anyway. So it's just a slightly different way of serving the content.
Yeah. And it does come back to knowing what it is that you want to achieve as a business.
But don't you think like you could do all of the content strategy prior to working out which platform you're going to, you're going to have an idea about that because it might dictate sort of the creative or whatever, but it really comes down to the core of the message you're trying to get across. And then you can work out how you distribute it.
100%.
Podcast distribution stuff's quite interesting because did you start it purely as sort of a content marketing piece for narrative, or did you start it because you were just interested in it?
I'm not a huge social media fan. I use it because it's an important tool and it's part of the marketing toolbox. But personally, I don't necessarily love it, and it's not something that really inspires me. Whereas I was sort of thinking, this podcasting, that sounds good. So I needed to find something that was unique that I could bring to the conversation.
But it fits so well with your, storytelling and and everything that you sort of stand for. It makes more. I mean, storytelling is around a campfire, right? It's verbal. That's sort of the history of storytelling. I was actually a really early adopter with podcasts, and it was something that I talked about for years. Of sort of, I really like the sort of long form, more sort of journalistic form of it, where people will find a story and then dive in and sort of put together a radio piece around it, as opposed to just the interview style. I reckon like 4 years we were saying we'll do it, and we never did it. I think the best thing you can do is just put down like an iPhone and just do one, right? And I've talked to a number of businesses, which I think is really cool, that actually do internal podcasts, which they don't release at all, but they sit there, record it, and just it's just a way of having, I suppose, a more focused, engaged conversation amongst the team, even if it's an internal, like say a dev team, just talking about new stuff that's going on, and maybe they can keep it for themselves. It doesn't need to become this big thing.
It's a bit more exciting than reading a staff newsletter.
Yeah, and it's funny, as we're not very big at all, but as we've grown, I find that I don't get to spend the same amount of time with all the team that I used to. So I do a Friday email, but now I'm thinking, why didn't I do it?
Friday audio.
Friday audio. I've never been to the podcast festival, so we've been podcasting since 2017.
No, it's cool to see Adelaide's podcast scene.
Yeah, I've seen there's a few new ones popping up as well.
There's always heaps. Yeah.
So are you going out and actually actively like mentoring people and showing them the ropes around how to do that?
So I run a full day podcast workshop, but really focusing on, okay, what's your strategy? Yeah. What are you going to do here before just diving into distribution, editing and that sort of side?
I think that makes, especially from a business perspective, like I've had internal conversations because this has sort of been my baby with like, Sam, how much time is everybody spending on the podcast? We're spending a lot of time on the podcast. How much is this podcast costing us? I'm pretty passionate about it and, have quantified it to a certain extent as well, which is good. But I think putting the strategy in place first is very smart.
Yeah. Well, and definitely, it's probably easier for people like you and I to, do a podcast because we are in the business of content creation.
It's meta, right?
Yeah.
And you can talk about the process.
But another business that's, that marketing is not their business, it's going to be another step harder for them. So, and they might not have the robust processes around content distribution, etc. So,
and it would be expensive to, pay an agency or even a freelancer to do that process. So, if you could empower someone in your internal marketing department to do that, then that would be great. Yeah,
and so that's where my training comes in and I do the same training for video as well. And obviously we provide video, professional video services, and we provide podcasting services, but I understand running a small business myself. There's only so far your budget can go, and you can do some of this internally. So the more I can empower people to do stuff internally, then it's not like I'm cutting, people like my family are like, why would you do that? Don't you want them to pay you to do it? And I'm like, but it's not feasible for them to pay me to do it. But they still might then I might build a relationship with those people. So if they do want to pay for a professional video down the track, they'll go, oh, hey, we should talk to her.
That's the way to do it, though. And I think that, let them start you doing it themselves and building the confidence. And if it's a benefit to them at that point, then maybe, they will want to engage you. So give away as much as you can, really.
And I love knowledge share because you always get something in return. Like, it doesn't have to be a financial return. Like, it's just incredible what you can learn and how that can change your life.
It's so funny. This morning we had did a workshop with a client. I kept saying knowledge sharing. I must have said it about 10 times. Then Nick, our designer, was like, Is that a real thing? Knowledge sharing? I've never heard that before. I'm like, really? You've never heard knowledge sharing?
I definitely feel like it's a thing.
It's definitely a thing. Nick's crazy if you're listening, Nick. But 100%. And I think that the more we can give away, the more you can add value. And again, like at the end of the day, everyone's busy, right? I think you get to a point where you can learn a lot, go, great, this is of interest to me. And then, they'll look at you as a trustworthy person to come back to. And I think in terms of content marketing, that's the best way to do it, right? Just give away as much as possible. Put some strategy around it, sure. But
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned there it's about building that trust and relationship. And I think that's where it comes down to. That's what a good business is built on.
Yeah. And I think somewhere like Adelaide, like at the end of the day, digital marketing is great, but it still comes back down to relationships. So often a digital marketing might just be sort of a top of mind to get a phone call, and then you're going to do a lot of the selling, offline anyway. So, I think people thinking that everything can just be fully automated and, all digitized, especially in a market like Adelaide, isn't really the case.
Well, Sam, thank you so much for joining me.
No
in
problem.
conclusion, though, can you share with me your Be the Drop tip? So your Be the Drop tip is your top communication tip for how to communicate in a way to motivate and inspire.
So I think really the best way that you can communicate to motivate and inspire is pretend you're having a conversation with like your best friend or my little sister. That's probably a really good one. Like that's my most real self, and I would be honest and look someone in the eyes and give them some real advice. And it might even be tough advice, but if I'm thinking of talking to that kind of person that I really trust, then I think the message gets across in a way that I'd like it to.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Be the Drop. Don't forget to subscribe in order to ensure you never miss out on one of our weekly episodes. Be the Drop is produced by Narrative Marketing, where we believe that stories connect individuals and that powerful storytelling can positively impact the world. To unleash your storytelling superpower, visit narrativemarketing.com.au or check out our social links in the show notes. To contact me directly with any specific comments you have, you can email me via amelia@narrativemarketing.com.au. And don't forget that whilst a task or challenge may seem overwhelming, a waterfall begins with one drop, and look what comes from that.